INTERPOL World Television this afternoon, it's great to be able to introduce Peter Shipp, who is the policing SME with SAS Institute in Singapore here. Peter, welcome to INTERPOL World Television.
Hi, thank you. Good to be here.
One of the things that we were discussing before we turned the cameras on was intelligence-led policing. And you know, as an ex-intelligence officer, I've got my own views. Is policing actually intelligence-led, or is it analysed activity-led?
Well, so my view, and I think you'll probably agree with me, is that analysis is very difficult unless you've got real intelligence. Whether or not the police have got intelligence in the way that perhaps you look at it is a different question. But I think intelligence-led policing is a phrase that means something to police forces. It's been about since the 90s. I think people forget that. So over the last 25 years, my view is it's served a lot of police forces very well. It's brought them into the modern age. They've started to direct their resource based on information that they hold. I think it has weaknesses. So if you have information about drugs, you'll do more work on drugs, which means you have more intelligence on drugs, which means you have a continual spiral. So I like to talk with our customers about being intelligence driven, and I think that brings you back into your view about what real intelligence is, and to think about what is available, what am I getting from open source intelligence, what other information, what is non-recorded crime information, and so how can I make the distinction between what is reported to us and actually what's going on in the real world, and how do we address those real life problems. So I hope that answers your question.
It does, but one of the things that comes out of that is what's important is data retention. Now, I know in the past you did some work with the European Commission on new data retention legislative proposals. Within Europe, within a global context, can we ever get some form of data retention consensus?
Well, we certainly can't get agreement, and yes, you're right, I worked at the European Commission as an advisor, and it was very obvious that there was no consensus. So there were different countries which had completely different views based on a national context, but also you had the companies that owned the data, and you had law enforcement, all with competing views. And I think that the sad issue is that as technology progresses and we're now better able to handle big data and to use analysis better, we're now starting to lose an opportunity. So for example, if you were to arrest and identify a terror cell or a terrorist, with big data, if that information was available, you could go back over a lot of years and find out a history of connections for that person, and perhaps identify people that they were associated with a long time ago, before they became important in a terror organisation, before they were so clever with hiding their associations and links with each other. But if you don't hold the data, then you can't go back and use all of the tools that are available to us. So actually I think in Europe we're losing a big opportunity, and I hope we don't go that way in Asia.
And that ties in with managing your intelligence and bringing out best practice in dealing with that. Now, in your bio, you describe yourself as having a unique view on best practice and intelligence investigations. What is that unique view that you have?
So, I guess what I meant by that is when I left, I worked for 30 years at Scotland Yard, and when I left, I felt that I had a real good understanding of policing intelligence. And actually what I realised working around the world is I still had a lot to learn at that stage. And I've worked extensively in the States, in the Middle East, in Africa, and for the last 6 years in Asia Pacific. And there are lots of differences in how to approach things, and so there is no one best practice. I guess that's probably the answer. There is no one best practice. You need to understand what people are trying to achieve, what's available to them, culturally how they deal with those issues. But I will say that there are some foundation to this, and I think that before we jump into what's the cutting edge technology, let's get the basics right. Let's look at what data do we have? How do we store it? Let's go through some data cleansing. Let's produce a proper policing data model that enables us to find that data quickly, to make sure that the links that we have, we can justify those. And don't forget, at the end of the day, The idea for policing is to prevent crimes and to prosecute, and even if you know the answer, if you can't prove it to a court, then actually you might be shooting yourself in the foot. So it's those basic models and the understanding that there is no one way to do these things.
So to help enhance that and get that consistency, you need a good intelligence platform. Now SAS produce a good intelligence platform. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how it enhances the policing process?
Yes, well, SAS probably aren't as widely known in policing as perhaps they should be. They have actually been about as an IT company for 40 years. So they're not going to go away, it's not going to fail, but we've brought in a lot of legacy knowledge and IP into a new product that we've produced. It's only been available for the last year or so. So it's the most modern platform available on the market, and it will do all of the frontline policing issues that police forces all around the world want. So let me give you an example. It will take that small piece of perhaps insignificant intelligence that an officer finds on the street. It will allow them to enter that in real time on their phone or smart device. It will allow it to be triaged. It will allow it to be pushed to somebody to do some analysis, some intelligence development on that, providing all of the tools within the same platform for an analyst with link charting and searching open source and bringing all of that information together. It will automatically produce an intelligence product, so the outcome of that intelligence work, so that we can send that through to tasking and coordination, so that when the operational officer has to make a decision about what they're going to use their scarce resource on, has all of the information on each of the opportunities available to them, so they can choose the one that is most important to that organisation and also most likely to succeed. And then we can, again, still on the same platform, push that to an operational team that can take that information. There's no double keying about where did this information come from, what are we going to do with it? And then within the investigation or the proactive operation, they're able to task people, break down all the strands they're going to do, to justify the decision making along the way, and at the outcome to arrest and charge somebody. But because it's all been on a single platform, we can then print out a prosecution brief that sometimes takes up to 2 months to produce using other systems. So really good, some huge benefits for policing, I think.
Well, as a former intelligence officer, I dreamed of having a tool like that, but I had to rely on people all the time. We've got technology coming in everywhere, it's touching everything. In modern policing, which is more important, technology or the human being?
So up until fairly recently, I would have said without a doubt it's the human beings, and there will always be a place for human beings. But we are trying to do more with less. So to try and make some of those decisions and to find the needle in the haystack, we are using more technology and better technology. I think we've reached a tipping point now where you actually need to have both really good operatives and really good platforms. So one of the things I would be saying is you need to have a platform that can change and develop with you. We've seen in policing and any intelligence over the past 20 years particularly that requirements change quickly, and we need to be able to develop those. There's no point buying a system that will be outdated in a year or two's time. But actually one of the things that we're also finding now is that the type of humans, the type of people that are employed on this aren't necessarily traditional intelligence or traditional police officers. And we're finding that if you're exploring the dark web, you're using police operatives that would never have been a traditional police officer, and they're getting better results. So we need to go back and think about who are we employing and why are we employing, but you will always need both, in my opinion.
Well, you've got many years of experience policing and then now developing tools to support policing, and you're seeing all the changes that are happening. What keeps you awake at night?
I guess and it actually does keep me awake at night, sadly, but you asked me earlier about intelligence-led policing. And one of the difficulties with intelligence-led policing that I identified was this ability of the self-serving spiral of only working on the information that you have and not going out and looking wider. And I feel that there's too much reliance on reported crime and government-led targets. So when are we going to do something about people trafficking and human slavery? You're not going to get people coming to the front counter of a police station anywhere in the world to report human trafficking, but we know it's a big problem there. But at the moment, by using intelligence-led policing and government-led targets, we're never going to identify these big issues. I think we need to step back and say technology has now moved us on. Intelligence-led policing served us well 25 years ago. We now need to step back, review how we set targets and how we judge the performance of police forces, so that we're able to use big data and analytics to address the real problems that do exist in society.
Well, Peter, I think you've set a real challenge to people who are watching the video whenever it's posted up, and hopefully they'll come back and comment on it and start to give us their thoughts on what you put out. It's been a real pleasure talking to you on Interpol World Television. Thank you very much indeed.
It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you.